Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. How you doing this week, Chip?
Doing great. How you doing, Eric?
Doing fantastic.
All set for trick-or-treaters?
We're all set here. Halloween is just a few days away. We've certainly got fall weather here.
And it's actually supposed to be very nice on Wednesday night.
So we are looking forward to that. So last week, we talked about putting together a personal growth plan. Today, we're going to talk about building a business plan. And the reasons for putting together a business plan and putting together a personal growth plan are very similar. You write things down, figure things out, and have a document that holds you accountable. Business plans tend to be a lot more complicated, and they seem to be a bit daunting for new business owners. So we're going to talk about how you build a business plan and what steps you need to take.
Yeah, a lot of it does start with things that we've been talking about before, which is figuring out what your personal growth plan is and what you really want to do. And then we talked about researching the feasibility of doing things a couple of weeks ago. So this is kind of like the culmination when you're ready to get together to actually put this together. So your business plan is going to include, what the idea is. It's going to include how the company is going to run. It's going to include the finances, business development strategies, and so on and so forth. And a really great resource is you can go online and get business plan templates all over the place, but the SBA website is very, very good. It's also a really good idea to visit your local SCORE office, which is the seniors. Basically, it's a free service where they're going to help you out with that too. But I like kind of combining the Michael Gerber approach from the E-Myth with starts with the business development process, which starts with a primary aim. And this is what you have to develop. Really, if you want to develop a business that you're going to love running, it's got to come from your heart. It's got to come from your primary aim. And the questions there are, what do you personally value most in life? What kind of life do you want to lead? What do you want your life to look like when completed? And who do you wish to be deep down? And basically, when you come up with ideas for that and then a strategic objective and business plan for putting this whole thing together, that's what it's all about. So, with that, we can get into the different components of the business plan.
Right. And that's a great place to start. And one of the things that I have found a lot of business owners do, they go online or they buy a book, and it all starts with the template. And the problem with the template is that the very first section that every template has is actually the last thing you should be doing.
The executive summary.
Exactly. Every template starts with the executive summary, but this is a summary of everything else in your plan. Trying to do this part before you work through the rest of the plan, it's like hitting your head against a brick wall. And this is where most entrepreneurs actually give up writing a business plan. So when you look,
those that are trying to do it themselves.
yes,
Because you and I, when we're working with businesses talking about business plans and the component, there's a reason it's called the executive summary. Summary always means the end. And I always, when I'm working with my clients on a template, I have the pages so they can see what's there, but write in big bold letters underneath executive summary, it says, do this last. Because it's going to summarize everything that's in the business plan. You're going to be able to put things in there, such as if you're looking for financing or partnerships and so on and so forth, you will have evaluated that through the business plan. And you can just hit a dotted checklist in the business summary, the executive summary, to list that. But it has to absolutely be done last.
absolutely. So don't even try doing that part before you've gone through the rest of your plan. So,
Yes. Part number two is this is pretty simple. This is what you're going to start with, and this is your company description.
right.
If you're a new company, you're talking about the idea and things that you're doing. If you're an existing company and you've never done a business plan, which there's a lot of companies out there that haven't, it starts with background information about your company, information about your products and services, customers, things like that. So it's just like a checklist of different things about your business. It's a nice reference section.
Right. And your company description, the more detailed you can make it, the easier it will be further on, because you're trying to figure out exactly what your company is going to look like. And the trick is, you're not trying to describe your company at the time that you're writing the plan. You're assuming that the plan is going to move forward, the plan is going to be successful, and that's the company that you're trying to describe.
Yeah, it's
So,
basically a snapshot as to when your company reaches maturity rather than startup.
right. So you put together what it is you're going to do, how it is you're going to do it, why you're doing it, what makes you the right person to do this. All of these go into your company description. And once you get the description done, you really have to go into the nitty-gritty. And one of the parts that comes up is your market analysis.
And this is part of the homework that you're going to be doing before you even write up a business plan. This is where you analyze who your potential customers out there, what percentage of the market you can get, whether it's feasible to do this. You really have to do a great market analysis before you get going on your business. Otherwise, you're just hoping that it's going to work out.
Right. In your market analysis, you have to look at your product, who your customers are, who your competitors are. And in terms of competitors, the biggest mistake people make is, well, nobody has a product or service exactly like mine, so I don't have any competitors. You have to broaden the definition. There are always competitors that do something similar, even if it's not the same. From a consumer point of view, somebody can be looking at your product and somebody else's, even though they're not identical. So you need to make sure you're including all of your major competitors.
Yeah, when consumers are out there buying something, they're buying solutions, they're buying comfort, they're not buying items. And that's something that you really have to keep in mind. When we talk about people preparing for networking commercials, we talking about value added rather than what you do, because unless people are looking for exactly what you do, people at networking meetings don't care, but they do care about how you're going to solve problems for them or make them feel comfortable, that kind of thing. So when you're looking at potential market, understand that that is the consumer psychology, and that's what you have to play towards, not what you're doing and mine's better than the other one.
Right. When you're looking at competitors, you're not looking at, is my service similar to theirs or is my product similar to theirs? The question you have to ask is, do these services or do these products try to solve the same problem? That's how you know they're a competitor. So once you've gotten a good idea of your market, and you really do need to know your market backwards and forwards, you now have to figure out how well you know your own company. And that starts with the organization of the company. Now, by organization, I actually mean two different things. One is the structure that you're going to take, whether it's a corporation, an LLC, sole proprietorship. And that's very complicated. So we're actually going to skip over that this week. We're going to come back to that in its own episode later on in the series, because it's very important to get that right and very important to understand, because every form has advantages and disadvantages and very specific legal requirements. So you need to really know what you're doing with that. And that, when you're making that decision, work with the coach, work with the score representative, work with the SBA. Most of all, talk to a lawyer, because this is all legal structure. You need to understand what's going on. So that's the first way that I mean organization. And the second is your organizational structure. President, CEO, COO, make an organizational chart. Now, a lot of small business people go, well, why do I need a chart? There's only two of us involved in this project. So we'll just split everything up. The organizational chart is not just about who's doing what job. It's a way of making sure that every job is covered.
Yeah, this is a really, really key document that I always work on with businesses, whether they're small or large. And what the organizational chart does is it actually lists what you do, what the company does, everything that everybody is responsible for. And for most businesses, this includes business development, it includes operations, it includes HR, and it includes finance. And if you get the business development, for instance, and look at what they're responsible for, this would be things like how you are selling things, how are you getting things in the door. It could be internet, it could be outside sales, it could be this or that, but you have to identify that. And then obviously operations is what happens with the process from when you get an inquiry in the door through when you're passing out your invoice to billing to bill the customer and everything that happens in between. And the great thing about mapping this out on an organization chart, and this is with blocks where you can do it, using a spreadsheet, or you can do this using a graphics program. But by having everything in front of you, you as a manager can manage your business very well. Number one, because everything is right in front of you, and number two, you can fill in the blanks as far as who's doing what. It's maybe you only have two people, but maybe there's certain things out there that you're better off subbing out. Things like payroll and accounting and HR and things like that. If you fix those costs and you have that down on the chart, that's a headache that you don't need, and your cost is fixed. And that's a great way to do things, because I think as a business owner, you're going to find that you are probably best and most important in business development and operations, running the business. So getting that on paper first is really, really important to do in a very simple format, because an organization chart does not have to be complicated.
All right. And there are a lot of people that try to make these very complicated. There's no reason for that to be. Your organizational chart should be as simple as possible, but you have to make sure that everything is covered. You would be surprised at how many business plans I look at where they've put together an organizational chart and they have forgotten key positions, such as accounts receivable, which is these are the folks that send out the invoices so that you get paid and the company makes money. It's a very important function, but most entrepreneurs don't think about that. They're thinking about putting the product together and getting it out. You have to make sure you have all of these things covered.
Yeah, and that goes in the financial management part of your organization chart. And one of the things that you can do then, once you have this organizational chart done, let's take accounts receivable for instance, is you can write up an operations manual, which is as simple as a checklist as to how things are done. So it could be receive the finished order from production and then invoice the client, send it out. If they haven't paid within 30 days, checking on there, making a phone call, things like that. And if you have a checklist to go down, it accomplishes two things. Number one, you can train your employees to do things right. And number two, you have instant accountability because you have a checklist right in front of you. So by starting out with an organization chart, you can take a look at the items that you're going to need to train people in or outsource and write up checklists to make sure that you're staying on top of things and can do that training.
Exactly. The org chart is a great way to put that first level of organization to your business. And then each box you can get more and more detailed with operation plans, checklists, so everything gets done and it gets done the same way every time. So once you've got your company put together, you really have to know what the company is going to do. So you need to put together information on what your service or product is. Again, as detailed as possible.
And
Ex-
again, we were talking about the value added thing. You have to explain how it benefits the customers that you're selling to. Other things like product life cycle, and other things to keep in mind is advancing technology, because what you're doing today is going to change a little bit as time moves ahead, and you have to stay ahead of the game there and realize that.
right. This is where you want to focus on what makes you stand out for the customer. You want to talk about the benefits, the features. You want to talk about why the customer is needs this. What problem are you solving? As Chip said, you want to talk about life cycle. Is this something that your customer is going to buy once and that's it? Or is it something that they're going to have to replace over time? Talk about seasonality of a product. If your business is an ice cream truck, obviously you are going to make most of your money in this, late spring and summer rather than in the winter. So what are you going to do during those down months? You should know what services and products you are going to offer. Are you going to offer a single product? Are there different ways that that product or service can branch out? This is where you go into all of that. And again, the more detailed, the better. And this is one of the reasons that I always insist that a business owner should write their own business plan. You can absolutely get help from a consultant or an advisor, but they should be writing the plan as opposed to hiring somebody to write it for them, because they need to know this information like the back of their hand, especially if they're going to be looking for funding. Investors want to know that you know your product or service, you know your company, you know your market. So this is not just a matter of putting all of this on paper for someone else. It's a way for you to learn all the ins and outs of your business and make sure that you really understand what it is you're going to be doing.
Yeah, and if you look at that, what you're doing, and it is something that's very unique that you're doing differently from other people, this is the time for you to take a look at the possibilities of things like copyrights and patents and that kind of thing. And again, you need to get a lawyer involved to do those kind of things. But if you want to protect the way that you're doing things, you have to identify that also. And if that is in process and you're looking for investors or for a loan or whatever, that really adds a lot of credibility to what you're doing if you actually have a patent in process or copyright in process and that kind of thing.
Right. When you're talking about patents, copyrights, these are things that are called barriers to entry. And especially from an investment point, people want to see that there are barriers to entry, that it's not going to be easy for you to come out with your product and then somebody to see it and immediately copy it. So you have to get into that information as well. Now, once you've got all that, how are you going to sell it? How are you going to market it? You need to put together a marketing plan. And again, a marketing plan is something that is very important, very detailed, and we'll be going into details of a marketing plan in a future episode. But for the purpose of the business plan, you need to have at least the basics down. Where are you going to sell your product? Are you going to put up an online store or are you going to go to retailers? Is your service going to be available locally or is it going to be a national service? You need to understand all of these things and understand how you're going to reach your target market.
Yeah, the goal of your marketing plan is to actually define how you're going to attract customers and also retain them. So it's really, really important to have that. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that, each of which have to be explored. Obviously, there's traditional marketing face to face. You do have the internet, which is amazing these days. There's strategic partnerships. There's all types of different things to explore. And what you have to do with your marketing plan is to explore all these and figure out what's the best way to go about. And it's going to be a combination of things. It's not going to be something that's normally simple unless it's just like an online store that's very, very easy to get to.
Right. And even as an online store, how are people going to find out about that store? You need to go into all of that. How are people going to find you? How are they going to find out about you? List the activities you're going to do. Budget, and it's important to find out what each of these things are going to cost. When you're putting together your budgets, and we'll get to that in a minute, it's important that everything be accounted for. So you need to know if you're going to run commercials, where are you going to run them? How much do those cost? Do you need to put a commercial on national television, or can you target via a cable station or a local system? You need to understand all of these things. And again, that's why we're going to go into this in more detail in a future episode.
Yeah, and your marketing plan really has to be in sync with your organization plan too, because the bottom line is getting the work in is one thing, but if you overload yourself and you can't get it done, you're going to clobber yourself that way and you are going to go out of business very, very quickly. So those have to be looked at together as your capacities, how you're going to get things done. So although these are separate parts of the plan itself, you have to really take a look at all of those. So the next thing to look at is if you're looking for funding, you have to have a very, very detailed funding request in your business plan. And this is what you're looking for, why you're looking for it, the type of funding that you're looking for, because there's a lot of different ways to go after that.
All right, you can be looking at angel investors, you can look at venture capital, you can look at crowdfunding. There's a lot of different ways to get funded. The traditional bank loan, whatever it is in this section of your plan, you need to understand how much money you're going to need and be very specific about what it's going to cover. Is it going to cover materials, salaries, marketing and advertising? Do you need to rent office space? You need to figure out what your costs are and how they're all going to be covered. And that's what people need to see in this section. Now, there's also something else. A lot of people write a business plan, but they don't necessarily need funding. They may already have funding or they're bootstrapping. The information in this section is specifically geared towards getting funding. However, it's valuable information even if you're not looking for it, because it helps you figure out all of your operational costs. And it helps you look at the next section, which are the financial projections.
Yeah, and there are a lot of great resources out there to help you with this portion of your business plan. You can talk to your bank because anybody you get funding from is going to have what's called a project list. It's going to have a form with line items on there where you're going to fill in exactly what you're going to be doing, how much it's going to cost, where the funds are going to come from. There's a lot of state agencies that can probably give that to you. Banks are good at doing that also, but it's really good to just go down the line as far as everything that you're looking for. Here in Connecticut, where sometimes we don't think things are that great, they do have a loan program that's got a pretty good application that lays this out. And if you go into the Fast Start program in the Connecticut website, you can at least take a look at the form and see the line items that are on there so you make sure you're catching everything. Because funding can come for a lot of different reasons. It's not just buying plant and equipment. There's all different other types of things that go into it.
Absolutely. And when you're putting together your financial projections, you're looking at a 5-year period of time, and you're talking about forecasted income, balance sheets, cash flow statements, figuring out your capital expenditure budget. What are you going to be spending? What are you going to be bringing in? Here's the trick: you want your projections to be optimistic, but not unrealistic. You have to be able to say, yes, this is feasible, because otherwise you're going to get 18 months into your plan and you may run out of money. So you have to be realistic about what these numbers show. That being said, when you project these things 5 years down, I don't know any business plan that has ever been correct for years 4 and 5. Things change, the economy changes, technology changes. It may be harder to put your product together than you anticipated. It may be easier.
No,
What
and that's why it's so important as far as ongoing operations. You have to visit your business plan, especially your financial projections, very, very frequently, at least every year, to go over that and update things. Because you're right. If you're looking 4 or 5 years out, it's kind of like a crystal ball. A lot of companies will just say, I'm going to be increasing by 10% a year or this or that. But you have to get something down and you have to be monitoring things. And as you do this, you're going to get better at it, because when you first do a budget, you might miss a couple of things. But as time goes on, you're going to be finding things that were missing from it, and it's going to make you a whole lot more efficient looking ahead. So really, really important. A business plan, especially financial projections, are not just a one and done thing.
And something to remember about these projections is that even the best people miss projections periodically. You hear it all the time on the news when companies are reporting quarterly earnings. These are companies that have been in business for decades, and they missed the estimates for this quarter. Things happen. Don't worry about if you're missing it, as long as you understand why you missed those estimates or why you overshot those estimates, and you can adapt your financial projections to meet reality. So once you've finished all of that, that's when you go back to the beginning and do the executive summary. And your executive summary is just that. It is a summary of the entire document that you have put together.
It's the highlight of what's in the business plan. It's like taking a look at a book at Barnes and Noble and looking at the inside cover to see what it's all about before you decide whether you want to read it or not. So it's the highlights, and by going through all these steps that we just talked about, it won't be too hard to put that together.
Right. And in fact, if you do this last, it should actually be the easiest part, because you've done the research, you've put the plan together. Now you're just putting together a quick summary of it that's going to entice somebody to read the rest of the plan. So we're coming up on the end of our time today. So, Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for putting together a business plan?
Well, you heard all of the components that we were talking about. And what you said at the beginning, do it yourself. Make sure that you're in charge of that. You can get help on the outside to guide you through it. It is so important to do it yourself. But the bottom line is every business needs a business plan. So you got to do it.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway for me is do the plan and do the research. It may seem burdensome, but that research will benefit you not just when you're doing the plan, but when you're actually running the business. When you have all of this information internalized, it makes you a better business person, and it makes it easier to run a company. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch us every week at xvadio.com/podcasts. You can also find us at the Apple Podcasts app, the iTunes Store, iHeartRadio app, Spotify, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. See you then.